Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we're back with another and reviewed. And today we're doing a non-metal band. We're doing one of the largest rock bands in the world, also described as alternative, post-grunge, have put out quality music for now 4 decades now, not like 40 years, but like in 4 different decades, they have now put out solid material. And with 10 studio albums, one having just recently come out, Medicine at Midnight, we're going to be talking about the Foo Fighters, a band that you probably haven't heard me talk about too much, either on my podcast or just at all, but they're a band that I've been pretty engaged with through at least half of my life. I was pretty familiar with most of their albums before I decided to revisit them and listen to all their material for this video. But yeah, there probably was like, out of 10 albums, maybe 3, 4, actually, you know what, probably 5, including the new album. So I wasn't entirely familiar with at least half their discography, meaning I hadn't listened to them from start to finish, but damn, did I enjoy going back and revisiting them. I was hoping that since they weren't a metal band, that maybe had a little bit more diversity in their sound, that the ranking would be a little bit more diverse, but unfortunately, only working with so much of a spread here. The bottom album got a 7.8 out of 10, and the top one got like an 8.3, 8.4. So not a huge spread to work with, but that kind of shows that the Foo Fighters have been very consistent over the years. Aside from listening to a lot of their music and at least a couple of singles off of every album over time, other ways I've been engaged with this band is I've watched documentaries on them. I've watched their DVD on Netflix, Back and Forth, which is an awesome history of them, basically from the beginning all the way up until their Wasting Light album. My dad and I think my wife was there too, but we watched the Sonic Highways documentary, which was fantastic. And again, there were a few albums that I was pretty engaged with when they came out. In Your Honor, Sonic Highways, their new album, Medicine at Midnight, and a couple of others. But everything else has been, like with a lot of other bands, getting into them after the fact. But I'd probably say Foo Fighters are definitely not like in my top 20 bands, maybe in my top 30 or 40, but they're definitely one of my all-time favorite rock bands, kind of alternative, I guess. Alternative has so many different subgenres and sounds within them. But I respect the shit out of Dave Grohl. He's one of the absolute best musicians. He's a monster of a frontman. He's got a hell of a voice. Plays a lot of different styles very well. He embodies his influences of like David Bowie, the Beatles, classic rock, a lot of other stuff very well too. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but he was also the drummer for Nirvana. No, but his musical legacy is long since been set in stone. The guy's a legend, and the Foo Fighters are an awesome band. A lot of consistency over the years. Just like with a lot of my other ranked in reviews, not really any bad albums here at all. Even if they got experimental here and there, they did it well. So, without further ado, we're going over their 10 studio albums from SelfTitled, 1995, all the way up until their most recent, Medicine at Midnight. They just came out roughly a month ago. There's like one 3-way tie in here, but I think I know how I've gotten this ranked. Then I'm going to go over my top 10 tracks. But yep, like I said, pretty familiar with this band, but there were a couple albums that I needed to get reacquainted with, but I think I'm pretty happy with what I got. And also, Foo Fighters make really funny music videos, if you didn't know that already. Again, Dave Grohl is the shit. Excellent guitar player, musician all around. So I'm excited to do this. All right. So at the number 10 spot, we have the album that inspired me to do this, Medicine at Midnight, their most recent release. So even though this got the bottom, I actually enjoy this album. It's just the downside is it's just a little bit shorter. It's one of their shorter albums. And even though I do not condemn them at all or knock them or dock any points for creativity or experimenting, this comes down to preference. If you want to hear a little bit more of a classic rock, funky stoner rock at times album, and that's your preference, this is probably going to be your favorite album. But after 2 or 3 listens, the album progressively got better for me. It all comes down to preference. Medicine at Midnight is my least favorite album, but it doesn't mean there's not great songs on there. Shame Shame has a pretty solid hook. It's got a great chorus. That bump, bump, bump. Like, the music itself is pretty catchy and unique. It's got a lot of great original content on here. Nothing sounds recycled. Nothing sounds out of the ordinary. It's just a preference thing. The title track, Medicine at Midnight, is my favorite song. The main riff of No Son of Mine is awesome. It's just kind of a repetitive song, though. Holding Poison really does have that classic stoner rock sound to it, which I really enjoy. Watch the visualizer videos on YouTube. Like, it's really enjoyable to watch. It's a pretty consistent album, just nothing that's really super standoutish. Nothing in my top 10 songs are off this album. Making a Fire is a pretty solid opening track, and Love Dies Young is a great closing track. But it's just, overall as an album, it's not their best in my opinion, but I think it's pretty solid for what it is. And you've been a Foo Fighters fan for a while and you want to experiment a little bit, here's some different sides of Dave Grohl. He really embodies the David Bowie side of things very well. And the different experience really was executed well enough. I think it was Chasing Birds. That song sounded like some really chill-ass Beatles material. So that's the bottom spot. I gave it a 7.8 out of 10. It got better with each listen, but I think Foo Fighters, in my opinion, have put out better material. But Medicine at Midnight is still very much worth the listen, especially if you're a classic rock or a more soft rock classic kind of guy or girl, whatever. All right. Number 9 spot is their 2007 release, Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace. Also, compared to other ranked and reviewed that I've seen, I think mine's pretty different. So there's going to be some albums that I've seen towards the bottom of most people's lists that are towards the top, and then vice versa. This is going to be fun. Echoes, Silence, Patience, and Grace actually opens with probably their best opening track, Pretender. Back in the day when I was in high school, I had this song on my iPod, but I kind of neglected the rest of the album, so I kind of had to go back and re-listen to this one for the first time. It's just inconsistent. It's front-loaded. It's got high energy, and it's very dynamic at the front, basically for the first 5 tracks. Cheer Up Boys is one of the better tracks on the album, in my opinion. But with pretty much every Foo Fighters album, there's always going to be a handful of high-energy songs and then maybe a ballad or 2 or 3 or 4. The ballad, the jarring difference between the energy of the high-energy songs like Pretender or Let It Die to something as slow as Statues or Home, it's too jarring. The album doesn't flow very well. It's inconsistent. But the songs that are good on here definitely do elevate it up beyond the bottom spot. Summer's End is a good song. So is Long Road to Ruin, especially that guitar solo. And even though it's a little repetitive, Erase Replace is a pretty decent song too. So definitely one of my least favorite albums. If anything, I probably like it less than Medicine at Midnight. But because it's got a handful of higher ranking songs like Pretender and Cheer Up Boys, it kind of statistically put this one above it. So it barely got the not worst album. It's got a handful of good tracks, but it's just kind of one of their most inconsistent albums and kind of hard to follow up the power of In Your Honor. But it's sandwiched between 2 of their best albums. Oh, I kind of gave away the game already. But it doesn't mean it's not worth a listen. You might actually really like it. I just found it to be, the dynamics to be not very fluid. And like I said, got some good high school memories to Pretender, but didn't really give the rest of the album a shot back then. Number 8 spot, this is where I'm probably going to get some heat. I see a lot of people put this one at the top, or at least towards the top. Their first album, their self-titled album. This is a very charming album. It's very raw, of course. Can't talk about a first album without calling it raw. Dave Grohl, I think he did this entire album by himself. And in the grief of a lot of life change and losing his best friend, this album has a lot. I wanted to put it up higher just because of the respect I have for it, for putting out such a solid first album that would lead to an incredible career. It's just, as great as it was for the time and as powerful as it was for the mid-90s, and I own this album since I was 14 years old, so I've always liked this album. It's just, they got better. The Foo Fighters got better. The big singles off this album, I'll Stick Around and Big Me, they're great songs. They're just not, in my opinion, Foo Fighters' best singles. I've always enjoyed the song For All the Cows. This Is a Call is also a good opening track, but there's just a couple of lyrics that just kind of throw me off. Like, there's certain words and sounds that just kind of bother me. I don't know why he's singing about fingernails, but it doesn't sound right. So, again, a lot of good rawness on here, like Good Grief or Oh George, Weenie Beanie. Like, they're not bad songs. There's a couple of great ones on here. It's just not their most mature work. It kind of lacks that depth and that consistency, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good, it's not a great first attempt, because it obviously led to even more brilliance down the road. So I kind of reluctantly put this one here, but I just think they put out better material later on. And again, the spread between the worst and the best isn't already tremendous. So these albums are already still pretty close. So that's the number 8 spot. Their first release, self-titled, Foo Fighters. Probably would be one of, like, if I was to introduce somebody to Foo Fighters' 10 albums, I'd say listen to this one maybe 3rd or 4th. Okay, sorry. Hopefully that was a smooth transition. I had to answer a phone call. Yeah, so these next 3, the 5 through 7 spot, are essentially a 3-way tie, but I've already figured out how to rank them. It's fucking close, though. And I ended up switching them around a few times, but I think I finally got it. Do I have to say that every time I do these videos? I think you guys get it at this point. Number 7 spot, their 2002 release, One by One, which I originally wanted to put up higher because this is one of those albums that I was familiar with, at least the single Times Like These back then, but I didn't actually listen to the rest of the album or the other singles. How could I have slept on All My Life that long? I see a lot of people put this album towards, like, the very bottom, but the reason I like this one a little bit more is because it is a pretty consistent album. It's heavier. It's a heavier album. It's got more edge to it. It's got harder hitting guitar work. All My Life, Low, Have It All. Those are all hard hitting on the guitar, at least from a Foo Fighters perspective. And I think the album actually closes on a pretty solid note too. Burn Away and Come Back are great closing tracks. So the book and defect is solid. The singles are good. Not their best, but they're good. All My Life, if I'm not mistaken about the timeline, I think some of Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age, if I said his name right, I think a little bit of his swagger might have rubbed off on Dave Grohl when he was drumming for him. Because All My Life definitely has a little bit of a Queens of the Stone Age sound to it, with the chord progressions and just kind of the vocal phrasings that he uses on the song. So I'm not saying All My Life sounds like a Queens of the Stone Age song. I'm just saying there's a little bit of influence in there, in my opinion. Low, with the drumming and the guitar work, sounds a little bit like System of a Down. Sounds like a Steal This Album B-side almost, even though Steal This Album is a B-side album. But I just love that. I love that the album opens up with 2 solid singles. Have It All is a good track. Times Like These is one of the best. I've always enjoyed that song. Disenchanted Lullaby is another heavy, soft song with a great chorus. Starts to slow down a little bit. Tired of You, Halo, Lonely As You. Lonely As You is the weakest track on the album, but there's still some weird dissonant charm to it. And then it picks back up with Overdrive, Burn Away, and Come Back. So it's a much more consistent album. It just doesn't have a lot of high points, like super high points. That's why it's sitting towards the middle back end. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say on that album. So most people, I think Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins look back on this album as being like their worst. The only reason why I didn't rank this one higher than the other 3-way tie is because as I started to listen to it a few more times, I noticed that band chemistry or that lack of soul really was present on the album. It doesn't mean that the music was bad. It's just you can kind of feel like there was something missing from this album. They say that there were like 4 good tracks and the rest were throwaways, or they would never play them live or play them again. It's their band. They can say what they want, but I disagree. I think out of 11 tracks, probably like 7 or 8 of them are pretty solid. But all in all, I do agree. This album does feel like it's lacking some sort of soul. some sort of spirit behind it. And even though sonically and genre-wise, I would prefer this over the next one I'm about to say, the next album has more of that cohesion and that soul behind it, which is why I give the following spot to their 1999 release, Nothing Left to Lose, which I see a lot of people put this one towards the top also. This one's kind of sitting right in the middle for me. It's a softer album, but it doesn't mean that there's not good alternative rock in here. Stacked Actors fucking is played in an octave tuning, so that's already sounds pretty heavy. But like, There's Nothing Left to Lose is another album that I wasn't super familiar with. All I knew were the singles, Breakout, Learn to Fly. That's all I listened to back then. So when I heard the whole rest of this album for the first time, I was pleasantly surprised. I got kind of a bias for loving albums from 1999. I think the turn of the century had some of the absolute best music and some of the best trends. That's why I always romanticize about it. And some of it's present in this album. But again, it sounds more cohesive. It sounds more... It's another consistent album, but it sounds like there's more hunger and happiness in this album that's kind of like an undertone, and that's why I rank it slightly higher than One by One. It's got that late 90s alternative sound in songs like Next Year or Generator, Headwires. It closes with MIA, which has a great chorus, has a great build-up. So all in all, it's a pretty much more mellow Foo Fighters album, but it doesn't mean it's not sprinkled with some harder hitting parts. It's a pretty great time capsule effect of what music sounded like in the late 90s, at least this genre. So that's why There's Nothing Left to Lose is kind of sitting comfortably right there. I don't think it has their best singles or their best songs, but I think as a whole unit, as an album, it does pretty well. I can see why more people put this towards the top. I'm just more of a metalhead. I like the heavier music, so it's probably why I put this one lower on the list, but really got nothing to complain about here. Breakout is a great single, and so is Learn to Fly. Great music videos. Got a lot of great memories to those songs. At the number 5 spot, we have their 2017 release, Concrete and Gold, where we pretty much end this 3-way tie. This is kind of their most inconsistent album, aside from Echoes, Patience, Grace, Silence. Concrete and Gold is just littered with great tracks, though. But the bookend effect isn't great. The intro T-shirt is okay, and the closing track, Concrete and Gold, is good, but it's not great. But every other song on here, the singles, Run, Sky is a Neighborhood, The Line, holy shit, I forgot how great The Line was. But other songs, though, you know what, let me just say this. The songs on here that kind of dragged this down, otherwise this could have been their best album. Make It Right, Dirty Water, and one of my least favorite Foo Fighter songs, Happy or Happily Ever After, whatever it's called. Those songs kind of drag the score down a little bit, but the rest of the tracks are all solid. Run is a great music video and song. Sky's Neighborhood, same thing. A lot of classic rock vibes on this album that are just buttressed by a little bit of heaviness, which I enjoy. La-Di-Da is catchy. I like that song. The chorus and just the overall feel of songs like Arrows and Sunday Rain. Sunday Rain sounds like a fucking like 90s R&B infused with like classic rock sounds. I love Sunday Rain. That's a great song. And then of course the best single, The Line, just hits hard. So Concrete and Gold just has so many great tracks on it, which is why it sits comfortably at the number 5 spot. Great music videos, great variety, but overall it sounds like a pretty cohesive album with just a couple little dips, but nowhere near enough to drag it towards the middle or the bottom. Oh, it's probably, right at the middle of the list. It's a great album. It's aged well. It's one of their newer albums, and it's done pretty well. I just learned that I have asthma, so if I sound out of breath, that's what that is. I learned that I have asthma, and that's why I'm projecting it. No, I found out why I get winded when I do these things. I get excited. I love fucking doing these videos. Number 4 spot is their, again, one of the albums that I was actually familiar with at the time. I got a lot of great memories to this album. 2005's In Your Honor. I was actually a little worried that this album would go lower because it's a double album. You have a rock album and then you have an acoustic album, but both sides are satisfying, to say the least. I was not disappointed by either side. This album is solid from front to back on both sides. Some of their best acoustic work is on this entire second album. And then the hard rock anthemic iconic tracks like Best of You or Dead or Alive, No Way Back. This album is also kind of like Echo's Patient Silence and Grace, where it's a little bit front-loaded, but the back half does start to pick up at the end, and Deepest Blues Are Black and End Over End are two great closing tracks, so that's why the score is weighted higher. So solid bookend effect that's more rhythmic with like more harmonic guitar solos or like more octave chords. It's not like bluesy, runny solos. It's more about the octave chords that are kind of like more alternative in songs like In Your Honor or Best of You. Best of You is like their best song of all time. So, of course, their singles definitely bring this album up. The middle songs, Hell I Can Do Without, but like Last Song, Free Me, Resolve are good enough. And then, of course, like I said, The Deepest Blues Are Black and End Over End are solid closing tracks. But just Best of You, DOA, and No Way Back, you can't fuck with those songs. And then In Your Honor is definitely one of their best intro-style tracks. The acoustic album side, I definitely overlooked as a kid. I re-listened to it from start to finish. It does so well. On the Mend is such a great track with an awesome outro. Still has such beautiful atmosphere to it, the first track. What If I Do is really good. I've always enjoyed the song since I was a kid. Another Round. That song has aged well. So all in all, the only two songs off of the acoustic side that aren't particularly great are Virginia Man and Friend of a Friend. Friend of a Friend is not a great song, but the rest of the album is pretty solid. And again, I found it oddly satisfying how much I enjoyed that acoustic side. I'm not really an acoustic guy. I can play acoustic pretty well. I can sing decently. But with listening to softer music, that's just not really my thing. So the fact that this album delivered that for me was pretty great. So let me see here. So yeah, at the number 4 spot, we have their 2005 release, In Your Honor. It's aged very well. It's got some of their most iconic singles on it. Mostly one, Best of You. To this day, one of their best songs. And got a lot of great memories from that summer. Summer of 2005. A lot of powerful music, a lot of great memories. And I was really getting into the throes of playing guitar and learning how to do it well. All right, and now we're up to the top 3. I'm trying not to make these things super long. I say that every video. Top 3. At the number 3 spot, an album that I was very familiar with because I got it when it came out, and an album that I see so many people, for what the fuck reason would you do this? I know music is subjective, we can have our opinions, but just objectively, this is such a well-written album, and like as a musician, like the execution of how everything was written, you just can't touch it. This is such a mature and great album. Maybe it's a style thing, I don't know. But the number 3 spot goes to their 2014 release, Sonic Highways. I know that the album cover doesn't dictate the sound, but that's actually already one of the coolest album covers I've ever seen. Obviously, I got it when it came out. I got it when I started dating my wife. So I got sentimental value for this album, but just objectively speaking, it's 8 tracks, but the songs are a little bit longer. It doesn't matter that the recording process was disjointed. It wasn't disjointed, but it was a journey. They went to different major music cities across America and recorded it. But like the actual music itself is just so well written. Dave Grohl's voice is awesome, and like there's just so much depth to this album. It's like their most progressive album. Something from Nothing is such a solid classic rock with so much swagger, like that guitar riff, the buildup that eventually leads to like the fucking zenith of heaviness. Like Dave Grohl's scream, like you cannot fuck with it. Out of 8 tracks, at least 6 of them are solid. The other 2 are like good. So there's a lot of consistency on this album. There's deeper song progressions that are still catchy. There's hooks. Even if it's a tiny bit inconsistent with songs like In the Clear or What Did I Do? Those 2 songs I can kind of do without. But every other song is solid. Something from Nothing, Feast or Famine, Congregation. My favorite tracks are half the album. Something from Nothing, Outside, Subterranean, and I Am a River. So it closes on a solid note with two of the best songs on the album, including I'm a River. I fucking love that song. Love that chorus. I love the key that it's played in. So I got a lot of bias there. But Subterranean has such atmosphere to it. The bass line is awesome. It sounds like some really psychedelic, mature Beatles, but like with that hard rock edge. Same thing with Something from Nothing. It's got like that classic rock, but with that hard rock edge injected into it. And of course, it picks up steam and gets heavy towards the end. Fuck it all, I came from nothing. Like, you cannot mess with that level of intensity in that song. And then Outside is just a guitar masterclass with regards to the Foo Fighters. Like, there's hooks in it, but like the lead work in the guitar, the solo, the bridge, like everything about all that stuff is just awesome. So I don't know why people shit on this album. I don't think they call it bad. It's just, it doesn't get the respect it deserves. Sonic Highways is such a great album, and I don't know, man. I don't know why people overlook this one. I tried to read up on it, but I couldn't find any clear-cut reasons. But as a guitar player, as a musician, I see the value in this one. So that's why it sits easily, comfortably at the top 3 for me. Did I get my point across? All right. As for the top 2, these were roughly tied. I could not figure out which one I liked more until something clicked. So I'll just say it. The number 2 spot goes to their 2011 release, Wasting Light. Like I said, I originally thought this would be their top album, but obviously at this point we know what their top album is. And that's kind of like the unanimous consent, or the unanimous whatever. Most people think that the other album's their best, and I agree. Wasting Light, though, I clearly put their 2 heaviest albums at the top. And what I mean by heavy, I mean by dynamic intensity, the amount of times that Dave Grohl screams or uses his aggressive voice. Wasting Light is just... Here's the thing. I think the 2010s might have been the Foo Fighters' best decade as a whole. You had Wasting Light, Sonic Highways, and Concrete and Gold. 3 solid albums from that decade where the maturity, which Wasting Light definitely kicked off. I overlooked this album. The single These Days came out when I was going through a rough patch in my life, so I kind of attributed that single to some negative times, and I was just like, I don't want to listen to this album. But then one of these days, no pun intended, I got the CD from like my public library, and I listened to it probably in 2015 or 16, and I was like, holy shit, this album's incredible. It opens up with one of the only opening track that might be better than Bridge Burning is Pretender, but not by much. Bridge Burning is such an intense song. They come out swinging with this album. You got Rope. Like, this album just delivers on everything. Like, the catchy guitar line, or the catchy guitar work with great vocal hooks, with great song progressions, with dynamic drums, with excellent recording. They did it all analog on tape in Dave's garage. Like, it's just such a fucking great album. It's what's that word? Musically, I don't know. I put vocally catchy and dynamic, which I agree with. Musically powerful, that's what I wrote. Yeah. Wasting Light doesn't waste any time. There's no weak tracks on here. Back and Forth and Matter of Time are the lowest ranked songs I gave, but they're better than like half the bad tracks on their weaker albums. Everything else, though, like the first 6 songs, Bridge Burning, Rope, Dear Rosemary, White Limo, Alandria, These Days, just a fucking powerhouse of songs that are all great, have catchy choruses. I love Dear Rosemary. I like the odd, kind of like self-titled, crispy sound of White Limo. There's a lot of catchiness there, like these classic rock riffs with so much swagger behind them. Alandria, I love that chorus. It's so powerful. Walk is a great... You don't really see Foo Fighters close with singles too often, but Walk is a great single that they closed with. Miss the Misery is another great track. So overall, Wasting Light, it's probably no surprise. I know a lot of people respect this album, but to me, it's one of their best. It was almost their best. It aged well. I enjoyed listening to it in its entirety the first time, and when I came back and re-listened to it, it hit me just as hard. So the first handful of tracks really bring the album home, and then the back half is great too, and then it caps off with a solid single, Walk. Respect. Walk. Gross. Do not unsubscribe, please. All right. Top album, best album, of course, goes to, once again, another Ranked and Reviewed where the sophomore success does it. What is it about second albums, man? The Color and the Shape from 1997, another great year for music. The Color and the Shape, where another album that I was very familiar with, at least, a handful of the tracks, the singles, of course. You got some of their most iconic singles on this album, and I actually mean that with this one. Their biggest song, Everlong, My Hero, Monkey Wrench, those are Foo Fighters' biggest singles, along with Best of You and a handful of other singles. But The Color and the Shape, dude, even if you look at kind of that intro, Doll, it just kicks off with so much aggression. This is vocally Dave's heaviest album. There's so much screaming on this album. I fucking love it. The guitar work is heavier. It just sounds more raw and alternative. It's kind of a different flavor of Wasting Light, and that's kind of why I gave this one the edge, because it's got that 90s alternative that's got some raw power behind it. It's a much more well-executed, more polished version of the rawness that you heard out of their Self-Titled. So ultimately, I gave this one the edge because it came out in the 90s, and it was perfectly executed, and there's more screaming on it. But the maturity was there. The fact that they put out an album this great as their second, it's just a testament to the power that they were going to bring and that they already did. Monkey Wrench is such a excellent single. Hey Johnny Part continues it with that beautiful alternative guitar work. And then My Poor Brain, Wind Up in Arms. It's just it's such a consistent album. The only song that I gave a 7.7 or a 7.8, which I'd probably give that song a little bit higher, is See You. And if I'm not mistaken, that might be one of the transition tracks. But Monkey Wrench, My Hero, and of course Everlong, which might be their best song. Those powerful singles really elevate this one towards the top. But the screaming that you hear in songs like Up in Arms or Enough Space, Wind Up is super catchy with that guitar work. February Stars is a beautiful ballad. Walking After You, the only thing I have to say about that is that the music video version of that song is way better. The album version is still pretty solid, but the music video version is way better. That if they had used the music video version on this album, it wouldn't have been a question. I would have definitely called this one the best. Not that it shits on Wasting Light, but it just has that edge over it. So overall, Color and Shape, excellent late 90s alternative powerhouse album. There's a reason why most people call this their best album. I'm right there with you guys. Again, huge fan of the amount that Dave Grohl screams on this album. The guitar work for its time is definitely among the top. And just the iconic singles. You got Everlong, Monkey Wrench, and My Hero. It's not even a question. This album collectively has their best singles on it. So, to quickly review from 10 to 1. 1 and 10! Sorry. Medicine at Midnight, Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace, Self-Titled, One by One, There's Nothing Left to Lose, Concrete and Gold, In Your Honor, Sonic Highways, Wasting Light, and The Color and the Shape. My top 10 Foo Fighters tracks, slightly subject to change, but mostly pretty solid, are Outside from Sonic Highways, Rope and Alondria from Wasting Light, Monkey Wrench, I Am a River from Sonic Highways, The Line from Concrete and Gold, The Pretender from Echoes, Bridge Burning from Wasting Light, and of course, Everlong and Best of You. For the bigger songs, you guys know which albums those are off of. Thank you guys for listening to this. Comment below what you agree with or disagree with. What are your favorite songs? What's your ranking? What's your favorite Foo Fighters album? Got any good stories of what songs or albums mean to you? I'd love to hear them. I respond to as many comments as possible. Definitely subscribe. I mainly do metal material for these ranked and reviews, but I will be doing some more non-metal material here shortly. Chevelle's about to put out another album. They're another one of my favorite alternative bands, so I'll be doing that one soon as well. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.